As we are discussing the functions of neuroglia, so today we will see ependymal cell. Ependymal cells are also known as upper garment because it provides the covering of ventricle central canal of CNS. The ependymal cell line up the ventricle or covering the ventricle and central canal of CNS, and because of that it forms a selective barrier between the nervous tissue or interstitial fluid and the CSF, nervous tissue and CSF. And the choroid plexus, we know that it forms the cerebrospinal fluid, and we find the ependymal cell lining, and they play a very important role, and they form the CSF. So the barrier between the blood and the CSF. Choroidal capillaries are fenestrated. We know that brain have the blood-brain barrier, and that blood-brain barrier is maintained by the endothelial cells by the tight junction. But in this area, choroidal capillaries, these capillaries, the endothelial lining of these capillaries are fenestrated whole, so that the fluid or molecule can pass through the endothelial cell. And choroid plexus, it produces the CSF, and not only the choroid plexus but other area also the CSFs are formed. For example, ependymal lining of the ventricle and central canal, pia outer glial limiting membrane also produce the CSF. CSF can be modified by the secretory or absorptive processes of ependymal cell. So let us see the barrier. What are the barrier we can find? The very important barrier, or the ependymal cell, they are responsible for the formation of CSF, we can find in the choroid plexus. These blood capillaries in the choroid plexus are fenestrated, so the fluid can pass through the endothelial cell. As the fluid pass from the endothelial cell, from the capillary, they have to face the ependymal cell. These are the ependymal cell lining. So this ependymal cell, they act as a filter, or it filters the fluid which are coming from the capillary, and that fluid form the CSF. So the ependymal cell, they are the barrier, selective barrier. Not all molecule can pass through the capillary to the CSF, but only selected. So we can say the CSF is the filtrate of ependymal cell. So because of that action or the arrangement, the ependymal cell, they produce the CSF. So, and this CSF, the choroid plexus, we know that they are in the lateral ventricle or the ventricles of the brain. As the CSFs are formed in the lateral ventricle, it moves to the third ventricle. Third CSF move from the lateral ventricle to the third ventricle, then fourth ventricle, then it enters into the subarachnoid space, and this subarachnoid space is filled up with the CSF, cerebrospinal fluid, and this subarachnoid space, the CSF is filled the subarachnoid space, and the CSF surrounds the central nervous system. So we can see here the CSFs, it's surrounding the central nervous system, and because of that we can say that the central nervous system is floating because of the CSF. It is floating over the CSF, and because of this CSF, because of this arrangement, we don't feel the weight of the central nervous system. The weight of the central nervous system is reduced significantly because of this CSF, and this is the CSF barrier between the blood and the ependymal. It acts as a barrier between the blood and the CSF. So this lining, the ventricular lining, is also made by the CSF. So we have the lining of ependymal cell in the ventricle or the canal, central canal. So this area, this is the brain portion where we have the neurons. All this, okay, just a minute. So here we have the neuron. These are the neuronal cell and other glial cell. And another part we have the ventricles where the CSFs are formed or subarachnoid space. So these ventricles are lined up by the ependymal cell. So this ependymal cell also is in between the CSF and the neuron. What is buoyancy effect? What is buoyancy effect? Buoyancy effect, when the CSF are filled in the subarachnoid space, it reduces the weight of the central nervous system. So because of that we don't feel the weight. So it's like a central nervous system is floating over the CSF, and because of that effect we call it buoyancy effect. And not only that, CSF also provide protection from trauma. So central nervous system is protected, very much protected by the CSF. Okay, thank you.